Waxahachie. This is Heidi Hood, your marketing manager at the Waxahachie Chamber of Commerce, and we are coming to you live tonight and to explore a very, very incredibly, deep topic and important topic about our relationship with food. We're helping our community and local business owners and their employees to recover from COVID and rebound, and we're supporting that Hatchie rebound by providing some mental wellness content every week, every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. We hope you'll tune in with us. So thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to toss it to my friend Noelle with Discovery Point Retreat, Waxahachie Chamber members, and servants of the community in regards to mental health and wellness. So Noelle, would you take it over?
I will take it over. Yes, thank you so much, Heidi. And welcome everyone to our mental health and recovery series. Today we are speaking with Adriana Ibara. Am I saying that right, Adriana? I want to make sure I am saying your name correctly.
Ibara, yes.
Ibara, yes. She is a licensed professional counselor with Eating Disorder Solutions in Dallas. And like Heidi said, today we are talking about our relationship with food. Before we begin, I want to reach out to our audience and let you know that if you're struggling with depression and addiction, please call us at 855-916-3289. We have counselors ready to help and guide you. Okay, so this is a tough conversation. I think that the best place to start when we're talking about relationships with food, because really talking with you, that was the first time I'd actually heard that term and pondered it. We all have a relationship with food. Do we not, Adriana?
Absolutely.
And so can you tell us what that means? Because I'm sure everyone can take something different from that term.
So for me, it means it's the emotion that you associate with food. Some people get happy with food. Some people get overly stressed when they eat food. But in some way, it causes emotional reaction of some sort.
So what about our formative years? Because I want to jump right into how this relationship starts, and then after that kind of move into the healthy and unhealthy aspects of it. But let's talk about our formative years, our relationship with our parents, the dialogue around food, and kind of what that looked like for us when we were kids.
So I think that's a really important question, Noelle, because for me, personally and professionally, I believe that personalities, as far as mental health and relationship with food, are formed early on. A lot of the time, people with eating disorders, they state that their parents did certain things with foods. They had certain restrictions, certain good foods versus bad foods. And so they learn early on what foods there are acceptable to eat in the family, as well as foods that are not acceptable to eat in the family. So I think that with eating disorders, a lot of the behavior is modeled. And so we learn that in childhood. And so we grow up with it.
And wouldn't you say that a lot of parental behaviors, because if we're talking about formative years, we as parents, and I'm definitely guilty of this, we don't really realize the messages that we're actually sending when we casually say, oh, I feel like I'm gaining weight. And we say that in front of our kids. Or we even give messages like, clean your plate. Or, I know I heard there are children starving in other countries. Don't you feel guilty? So can you talk us through how we as parents accidentally send messages we're not aware of and we don't really mean to?
I think it's important for parents to recognize the messages they're sending. Kids early on, developmentally, studies show that they won't perceive them the way we do. So ill-intentioned parents would make those comments, and so kids perceive it, they internalize them and figure out what is okay if I'm gaining weight or am I not supposed to eat this. They make those connections with either getting the reinforcement from their parents or getting negative reinforcement from their parents. So and in adults, what that looks like is they think back consciously or unconsciously as far as my parents said that this was good food. My parents said this was bad food. And so for some, it causes anxiety, and for some, it causes joy. Mm-hmm. And I think culture also makes a big point. A lot of cultures, they will throw away food. Matter of fact, my mom, she actually ended up eating the rest of our food because we wouldn't eat it. And I think in the Hispanic culture, that's very common, and apparently in the Italian one as well.
Yes, yes. Boy, could I tell you stories. One of the things that was prevalent in my family, and I've seen other parents do it, is we as parents feel free to make comments about our children's bodies. Just, boy, you look thin, or you're gaining some weight. And so I think also in terms of the relationship with food and the messages we send about food, but also the messages we say directly to our kids. What are your thoughts on that? And there's a sigh.
I understand. I recall my mom saying some messages to me, and looking back, I understand that they were never to be hurtful. They were to be encouraging. But I also understand the way somebody with an eating disorder, they interpret those messages. I had a client recently who mother made a comment, "Oh, you look great," because she came into our center at 87 pounds and she was at 115. And her intention was to be helpful. But with eating disorders, that isn't very helpful. Even with eating disorders, I think that's important to, obviously, not every time we're going to have good and bad days. And so it is important to provide that reinforcement and positive unconditional regard, but it's also important to validate your kids and not have such a message. Especially, you have to take into consideration that they're getting those messages in the home, they're getting those messages at school, there's getting those messages in the media. So I think it's, as parents, they could probably limit those messages or even help challenge those messages because they're getting them everywhere else.
So what I hear you saying is talking about healthy conversation about food, which, I mean, who does that? That's like a skill that we really need to learn and be aware of the words kind of coming out of our mouths. So tell me, what kinds of things are positive things to say to our kids? What should we be telling them?
I think acceptance is a big thing. If kids eat, now if they're eating constantly sweets, obviously that contributes to other problems in the future. Or diabetes and stuff like that. But they could teach them balance. All food is good food in balance. If your body is craving chips, it's for a reason. There's something mineral or vitamin inside those chips that your body is craving. There are no good foods, they're bad foods. They're just food. I think if we teach them to accept that and their bodies, I think that's what would be the most beneficial for parents to understand.
We were talking earlier, you were talking about this mind-body connection, which I find so fascinating. And so many times we disconnect our kids from themselves without realizing it again, because we were disconnected because we would say, I feel this way or I think this way. And maybe by accident, we parents are saying, no, you don't. Well, a child would say, I'm cold. And you would say, no, you're not. I know, specifically coming from an Italian family, I didn't even dare tell my grandmother I was full because she would adamantly disagree with me. So can you talk us through that mind-body connection and how we lose it, and then how do we get it back?
I think people a lot of the times don't understand how connected we are. It's a holistic model. It's what we eat from an eating disorder perspective. What we eat, certain foods do give us energy. Coffee gives us energy. It raises our awareness. It gives us, for a lot of people, it enhances their focus. There are certain foods that you should probably, they're not better for you, but nutritionally they would be, like vegetables. So if we can recognize that there is a connection between our food and our body, if we nourish ourselves and not just eat pickles and ginger ale, but nourish ourselves with eating all the 3 food groups. It's not restricting yourself from a certain food groups. No carbohydrates is a lot of people's philosophy. So getting everything that you need and understanding that the gut health is a lot to do with your mood. Statistics show actually that the brain, they call it the second brain because it's such an integral part. But in order to operate at 100% or close to 100% capacity, you have to eat all 3 major food groups. And so if they could help their kids understand that it's important to eat your vegetables, but it's also important to eat complex carbs. It's also important to eat your proteins. And so that's going to help with your mood, which in turn is going to help with the way you feel about yourself, which in turn is going to help with your actions, which in turn is going to help with your thoughts. So there's such a big cycle connecting, and it starts with food.
I love what you're saying. And for those listeners that are wondering, I've never thought about this. I wonder if I actually have an unhealthy relationship with food myself. What would you tell them in terms of being able to recognize that and start to make those changes? How do you recognize that in yourself?
The first thing I would say is give yourself grace. You don't know what you don't know. If you've never had these conversations, if you never had these thoughts, if you grew up in a home where food was good food versus bad food, or you clean your plate, or exercising is the way to go if you consume a pizza last night, then you don't know anything different. The second thing I would say is learn to recognize that those behaviors, your thoughts, your obsessions with food, is it consuming your life? Is it consuming everything that you do? Do you wake up? Are you in a meeting thinking what you're going to eat? And then the third thing is ask for help. Find out if you can go online. And I preface that because when I was in graduate school, I had 5 of the 10 disorders that I looked at. I thought I was bipolar. I thought I had borderline. I thought I was dying of cancer. And so with getting the help, looking online is a start, but also call treatment centers that focus on that. So give yourself grace, be aware of it, and then seek help is what I would say.
So what about moving into actual eating disorders? So there's the thing, I hate to use the word normal. We all have some kind of normal, healthy, unhealthy relationship with food. At what point does it move into a trouble zone where we're not just talking about, I have some issues with eating, but it's time to start really looking at getting help?
That's a great question. I talk to a lot of people in both my roles, outreach, and in with clients that I do in private practice, and people think they have an eating disorder. I think the biggest, I would say the biggest indicator is if it's a short-term thing. People with eating disorders, it's a long, drawn-out thing. A lot of the time it starts early in childhood. And so if you're struggling with the same thing for many, many years and you achieve a goal and it's not enough, you have such a big emotion tied with food, then you can start looking and finding out if you do. So with disordered eating, there's no normal eating. Everybody has, studies show 90% of people have disordered eating of one shape or form. Before coming in, things that I didn't know about, like cutting your food or ordered eating is a disordered behavior. Fast pacing is a disordered behavior. Water loading is an eating disorder behavior. So people have that, but I think if you're able to recognize that it doesn't go away within a certain time frame, or that you're never happy, it's never good enough, then ask for help.
So let's talk about some of the more popular, well-known eating disorders and kind of what they look like. We all have our own ideas of what anorexia looks like, what bulimia looks like. Can you talk us through those on a more specific, granular level and give us a real picture of what that looks like for an individual?
So with anorexia, according to the DSM, it's restriction of caloric intake for a long period. So these individuals will they'll consume from about 500 to 800 calories a day at most. Additionally, people with anorexia, they have a tremendous amount of guilt associated with food. There are foods that they'll eat and they'll go into a panic attack, i.e. ice cream. They can never consume ice cream or anything like that. Those are what they call fear foods. Additionally, with anorexia, there is a lot of binging and purging. And people think throwing up is, yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
I'm surprised. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Binging and purging is a way that they compensate for food, for their food intake. Even if they have a goal of 900 calories and they eat 905, they will binge and purge. Another big one is laxative use. With people with anorexia, they ingest laxatives. Not even, this is an actual client of mine that ingested about 250 laxatives maybe within a week. And the reason is it's because of their obsession with thinness, obsession with getting rid of the food, obsession with their thoughts of being thin. Unlike anorexia, bulimia is, there's a lot of the binging, the purging, the over-exercising, just like with anorexia, but they are within normal body weight. The body weight for anorexic typically is a lot lower with what the standard, if somebody's 5'4", they have what normal range is. With bulimia, they fall in that. And so it's a lot harder to tell with bulimia, but with bulimics, they will restrict, then they will get so hungry, they'll go into a binge. They'll consume the 2,000 calories in one sitting. Then they feel guilty and they purge and use laxatives or over-exercise. And the third big one that we see is binge eating disorders. With binge eating disorders, typically people will consume multiple throughout the day. They will consume about 2,000 calories per meal. So throughout, even if they eat 3, that's 3,000 or 6,000 calories. They'll hide food. They'll hoard food. So a lot of these people are very secretive about food. I had a client recently that she said, I didn't want people to think that this was all for me. So on my way back to the cafeteria, I ate, or to her office, I ate 1/4 of it. That way people didn't think it was about me, that it was all for me. So there's a lot of secret, there's a lot of hoarding, there's a lot of consumption of calories. The biggest difference is they don't exercise. There's no compensatory behaviors. So they become obese and a lot of diabetes.
Isn't one of the dangers, which I read this, that organs with anorexia start to shut down? And so even though someone with an eating disorder may look perfectly healthy, their organs literally are shutting down and there becomes this point of no return. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Absolutely. So a lot of what we see in my eating disorder center, eating disorder solutions, is these people starve themselves to the point where they go into liver failure, heart failure, and even brain failure, because their body, nobody can operate on negative nutritional deficiencies, because remember, these people are over-exercising. So they starve themselves for a long period of time, and which in turn causes those medical problems, correct?
A lot of times we'll see pictures of an individual with eating disorders and they're just gaunt, just unbelievably gaunt. And many times I've heard people ask the question, I myself have asked, how can they not see that they're on the verge of death? How can they not see what their body truly looks like? Can you talk us through that just a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. And for somebody who doesn't have an eating disorder, it's something very hard to conceptualize. But with people with eating disorders, especially when they're that thin, they don't. They have something, there's a clinical term called distorted thinking. So they see something completely different than we would see. If they are 67 pounds, they see somebody that's 150. So they don't make that connection. Their mind does not make that connection. And so for somebody who doesn't have an eating disorder, you would think it'd be very obvious. For them, it's not.
So for those of us kind of more on the normal, unhealthy side of things, what is your opinion about dieting? And how do we not glorify thinness yet move towards healthy eating, and how does dieting fit into all of that?
Well, this is my personal opinion. I think diets, I understand diets. I understand we live in a culture with instant results. Fast food, we get mad if it takes 3 minutes. It's no longer considered fast food. So we're looking for the same results with dieting, but they're not sustainable. I think that diets, I understand them, but my recommendation or my recommendation would be make it a lifestyle. Make it eat healthy, exercise. 1, it's going to help with the depression. 2, it's going to be more sustainable and maintained throughout your life. And 3, it's going to become a lifestyle. You're not going to have to think about it. Those thoughts, you're going to be able to enjoy your family, be present instead of thinking of food. So
Adriana,
I don't agree.
I so appreciate you coming on the show today and diving into this topic. I don't even feel like we have scratched the surface, but can you leave us with kind of your general philosophy and a message that if you could say anything, what would you like to say? How would you like to leave us?
I would love to say 2 things. 1, all food is good food in moderation. 2, recovery is possible. I think that people think that just like with anything else, that they're going to be living with it. Just like diabetes, just like with heart disease, it's a maintenance. You can, if you seek out treatment, if you get the help, if you're willing to do the work, recovery is possible. You don't have to struggle with it.
Leave us with your contact information so people can get a hold of you if they need to.
Sure. So if anybody needs to get a hold of me, my contact information is 972-942-0782.
Say it one more time.
972-942-0782.
So I just want to thank our audience for spending some time talking about our relationship with food, and please don't hesitate to reach out. If you are struggling with mental illness, depression, anxiety, substance use, please also feel free to call Discovery Point Retreat at 855-916-3289. Don't be afraid to reach out. Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Noelle.
Y'all give Discovery Point a call. We are here to support you, Waxahachie, on your way to recovery. And so thank you so much, Adriana, for being here today. Nicole and Discovery Point Retreat. Everyone have a great night. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.